Hey, what's happening, everybody? My name is Mike Trudell, and very pleased to be joined by Pete Zayas and Joey Ramirez for a little roundtable on Andre Drummond. I don't know if you guys heard the newest Laker acquisition. And the three of us are just fresh off of hearing Andre speak to the media in his first availability. Now, Pete, if I could start with you here. So you spoke earlier today on your podcast, Laker Film Room, about everything about Drummond. So I wonder, he had a very defensive focused kind of I am here to win vibe, a very positive vibe in his presser. And I wonder if just hearing him speak and kind of hearing the way that he spoke about defense, especially, informs what you had already thought by going through his film, by looking at his numbers and all those kind of things.
Absolutely, because he's a guy that has absorbed a lot of offensive responsibility. So when a guy like that comes to a new team, you wonder, how many touches is he going to want? Is this something that is a big area of focus? Like, when asked questions by the media, what are the first places that he focused on? He went right to defense. The specific comment that really stood out to me was the idea of 1 through 5, right? Obviously, you're not going to intentionally match him up with point guards and shooting guards and things like that. But there are all sorts of circumstances on defense in the NBA, especially on our team, where we really like to scramble and fly all around, where you get cross-matched, and taking pride and having the ability to defend those guys. He's so unique, Mike, in that he's 275 pounds. He's got really agile feet. He was third in the NBA in steals last season. And that speaks to a degree of perimeter capability, while also being a big guy that can play more Vogel's no roller behind coverages and pick and rolls. So that focus on defense, if he's able to really lock in there, man, where him and Anthony Davis together, there are about 5 guys in the NBA that where you go, nobody that big should be able to move that well. And we got 2 of them.
Yeah, it's a great angle to take there, Pete. And when he said that, I wanted to go back and listen to it almost because I want to make sure, because that is the thing that makes the Lakers so special and so unique, in that you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis who actually can guard 1 through 5. They actually can. They can hang with almost every point guard. They can go down and bang with almost every center, with a few exceptions. And actually, there aren't exceptions, right? LeBron could bang with Embiid if he had to, right? I'm not going to take that off of his plate. So Joey, to hear Drummond say that, and then to consider the fact that when he's been in Detroit, he's only played with one other All-Star in his entire career there, and that was Blake Griffin in the 18-19 season. So all of those things together, I'm very curious then to see, since the mindset appears to be there, how that plays out on that side of the court especially.
Yeah, me too, Mike. I mean, Andre Drummond has never played with anywhere near this level of talent that they have on the Lakers. He's never played with anybody near LeBron James, anybody near Anthony Davis. And even if you take a look at Blake Griffin, who had that 1/3 team All-NBA season in which he was a great player, he was not hitting the level that LeBron and AD were. And they're also different kinds of players, right? LeBron is the best passer in the NBA, led the league in assists last year. So I think Drummond will feast with him once those two are linked up. To go quickly back to Pete's point about defense, that is where I'm most curious about how Drummond fits in. And it's also where I'm really optimistic, because when I evaluate a player, I tend to look at what are multi-year streaks that this guy is doing. Andre Drummond has about 1,000 multi-year streaks in which he is among the NBA leaders in X category or Y category. So, for example, he's led the NBA in offensive rebounds for the past 7 years in a row. Since his sophomore season through present day, he has led the NBA in offensive rebounds. That is a huge, huge asset to the Lakers. And looking at the defensive side, while I'm not the biggest believer in defensive rating, I do think it does give you some context. But he's been top 10 defensive rating for 6 years in a row. And I don't think that can be just thrown out. And then when you look at the tape, he's got some of the fastest hands in the NBA. There's a reason why he's led all centers in steals for 4 years in a row. And why last year he was 3rd in the NBA, regardless of position, in steals. And I think this guy, he has great timing. He has quick reflexes. He can get in passing lanes. He can go up for some blocks. He's a guy that I think will thrive under Frank Vogel and the Lakers coaching staff, because it's only been a year under Frank, right? But we've seen a pattern of guys picking up their defense and playing some of the best defense of their career under Frank Vogel. Kyle Kuzma definitely fits that billing. Alex Caruso, I would say Markieff Morris in the playoffs last year. LeBron having an all-NBA types, all defensive type season prior to his injury. Anthony Davis, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on. I'm very curious as to how Andre looks defensively on a Frank Vogel team.
You know, Joey, we may need to keep a specific part of Lakers.com for stocks. We may have to have that as an auto feeder now between Drummond and AD. Yeah, I love me some stocks, man.
Between Drummond and AD, they're the GameStop of stocks this year.
Man, all right, that still works. That still works. So Pete, let's talk offense for a little bit with Andre Drummond. And if you just consider part of what Joey was talking about there and the level of talent that he is going to be playing with, I think the main part of this that I want to emphasize that he hasn't really been able to play with a big time guard or a big time playmaker. And I think the Lakers have the best playmaker in basketball in LeBron James, of course, once he comes back. And even in terms of some secondary playmakers, whether that's a Schroeder, a Caruso here and there, or in kind of a bigger lineup with AD and the attention that he creates. But it's LeBron specifically that I'm thinking about and envisioning. What does that look like for you, assuming that Drummond starts, which we don't know yet, but let's just go through that exercise. What does that look like? How different is the diet of shots that he's going to be getting playing alongside LeBron than what he's used to?
Yeah, I think that's going to really improve his shot quality because LeBron, and we're seeing this in his absence, is LeBron absorbs so much of the decision-making of the team. He's the guy who decides if, Drummond sets that wide pin down for KCP and KCP's going to curl it or fade it for a three, and Drummond's going to roll to the hoop. LeBron's the one deciding where that ball is going to go. And that's better than anybody who Drummond's ever played with, as you said. Drummond's got a bit of an ability to handle the ball. We've been running a lot of horn sets, a lot of plays where the big guys are kind of stationed at the elbows, the corner of the free throw line. And that really fits into what he does and what LeBron does. There's all sorts of action that can be really, he sets great screens. It could work. My biggest question is, from watching tape on him, he's not as explosive of a leaper this season, just from what I saw this season, as he has been in previous seasons. I remember a couple of years ago when we got JaVale in particular, and Rob Pelinka was talking about the construction of the team and talking about the value of vertical spacing and how that actually helps your shooting game. We haven't shot the ball particularly well in a while. And so can Drummond be a lob threat for LeBron? Because if so, that means weak side guys have to drop down. That frees up shooters. That means the quality of shots that a guy like KCP gets can very well improve, and even the quantity of the shots that our shooters get. So that's the biggest question for me, is does he still have that ability to really finish above the rim? And if so, he and LeBron are going to be peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, so Joey, I think that he does. And one of the things that I like about when you and I in our kind of texting we have back and forth, you are a advanced master of NBA.com/stats. And one of the favorite areas of going in there that I think you first of all showed me how to get to was where you could do the shooting splits and find out like literally exactly how many alley-oops a guy has had, how many layups, how many dunks, and on down to the shot profiles. And Pete and I were discussing this earlier. When you look at it, it's super obvious what kinds of shots are effective for Drummond. And then it's also super obvious which ones are not as effective. And it's basically what Pete was just talking about with the shot profile. It's the dunks, it's the alley-oops, it's the hard rolls to the rim versus kind of the stuff that's going to come out of a post-up, whether that's a baby hook, right? Or just some kind of a move where he has to create because he's been playing with guards that, with no disrespect to Detroit's, a lot of the young guards, right, lately, still trying to get there in their career. Same thing even in Cleveland, as much as we think I was going to say the Sexton backcourt, but Colin Sexton and Darius Garland, right, still have some developing to go. So I know you've pieced through some of those numbers. Have you seen that same thing where it's pretty clear how Drummond can fit in if he can really kind of zero focus in on the things that are most effective for him?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were talking about how he's never played with offensive threats like AD and like LeBron. He's been, he's a two-time All-Star. He's been expected to be an offensive focal point, if not the offensive focal point. And at some point, when you occupy that role, it can't just be, hanging out in the dunker spot and, running some pick and rolls. You do have to go one-on-one, whether it's a post up or, Andre does like to go and try his dribble now and then. Whereas I think coming to the Lakers, you have two guys who are elite offensive threats. There is going to be no pressure for Andre Drummond to break out the back to the basket game, to try his luck from mid-range. I think that his role on the Lakers is going to be completely different than Detroit or Cleveland, which he's only in Cleveland for a handful of games, but it was very similar to that Detroit experience. I think I think he'll benefit off of having the best playmaker of his career by far in LeBron. Detroit has been known to not have a true point guard for a very long time, right? Derrick Rose was great in Detroit, kind of had a career resurgence, but it was definitely more as a scorer than as a playmaker. I think that when you look at Andre's shot profile, it definitely shows that he is going to be more effective in that screen and roll, in that put back, dunker spot area. And I think that's all that's going to be asked of him here. I think, maybe in these first handful of games where there is no LeBron or AD, we'll kind of see more of Detroit Andre shot selection. But I think once the two big guns come back for the Lakers, I think that he's going to be very much a complementary piece, and he very much will be somebody who seems to be wanting to occupy that role in search of a bigger goal.
All right, very well said. Hey, Pete, can we go just real deep on rebounding for a minute here?
I'd love to.
All right, let's nerd out on rebounding. So
yes.
Drummond's career high from a rebounding standpoint came in 17-18, 16 rebounds a night, and that was in only 33.7 minutes. The next year, 15.6. The next year, 15.2. So relatively in that range. And a lot of his rebounds come on the offensive end. Some of them are tips. He's always around the bucket, kind of bunny hopping. And, so last year the Lakers had Dwight Howard, and the way that Dwight works the glass is a little bit different. He will intentionally get his body all up on whoever the guys under the glass are. And that's why you see a lot of fighting. Okay. We just saw it with Montrezl Harrell. That's how Dwight does it. Drummond isn't quite as direct to the guy, but he's just kind of lurking and reading and waiting to pounce. And it's a marvel to watch. That's not even to talk about his defensive rebounding. So please take it where you want. But what does the rebounding prowess that he has, what does that bring to the Lakers specifically?
Oh, I'm so excited about that. That's something that's not necessarily a strength of Trez's. And so if we find ourselves in a position in the playoffs, for example, where a team is beating us on the offensive glass, that's something that Dre can come in and help with that. But on the offensive boards, he's a great double jumper. He's got really good hands, really good timing. Mike, he's got the best rebound percentage in NBA history in terms of available rebounds that he grabs. Now that goes back to 74, right?
Let me just check in with Joey. Is that good?
If Pete says it's good, I believe it's good. I would say best in NBA history. I'll give that the green check.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Pete.
All right. And so that has implications on both ends of the floor, right? If you've got somebody's going to have to box out Andre Drummond and Anthony Davis. Perhaps a LeBron James might swoop in at some point on a possession if he decides to. That is problematic.
Kuz is thirsty on the glass.
Yeah, exactly. And that is problematic for a league that has gotten smaller and smaller, and that emphasizes getting back in transition defense more than crashing the offensive boards. I think we're going to be somewhat of an exception to the rule to that, because we've got guys who are really good at doing that. And then on the defensive glass, his ability to kind of clean everything up means more transition opportunities, more leak outs. He's a good outlet passer, right? So rather than having to have your guards drop down to say, maybe help Trez against a big body on the boards, that same guard, instead of dropping down to help, is leaking out and filling a wing. And all of a sudden, KCP's ability to run the wing, or Kuz or someone like that, they are now out on the break, and we've got more opportunities like that. So just that ability to end or extend possessions on both ends of the floor should be really helpful for this team.
Oh, okay. It was like a little bit of a light bulb that just went off. So credit to Pete with the way that you were describing that, because since Drummond, you can count on him to such a degree to get the defensive rebound wherever it goes, that if you take out KCP, but even like AD, right? Because we know how AD is in those leak out situations.
100%.
And then even to an extent, but guess what? LeBron James, I believe, is the best transition player in NBA history. He hasn't had to do as much of that. A lot of times he's been more in that passer role, and then he doesn't have to run down on the court the other end, right? It's like advanced genius almost, the way that he's doing it. But Joey, did that hit you too in that way? Like how the Lakers can then take advantage of the style. And Pete's talked about this, where like when Marc Gasol's in there, he has his own strengths, but that's not as much a part of it, where the whole team can kind of go as this engine with a ton of thrust. That does seem like it can fit with how that group wants to play.
Yeah, Mike, I'm super curious as to how that looks, especially because when we look back to last season going into the playoffs, one of the dominant narratives, one of the I guess kind of thorns in the Lakers' side was they have this elite transition offense, and they have this kind of mediocre half-court offense. How is that going to look in the playoffs? You know, typically the pace slows down, transition opportunities are seldom. And what happened? The transition offense was just as good as in the regular season, if not better, and the half-court offense went up a couple pegs. So you take that and you apply that logic to this season, and it does look like they're going to have the recipe to kind of maybe do that again, where with an Andre Drummond, with a LeBron James, with Anthony Davis, KCP, all these guys that do thrive in transition, you have a very dangerous fast break attack for the Lakers. And then we'll see how it coalesces in the half court. So I can see that narrative kind of popping up again. And it definitely does, just as somebody who covers the team, looking back on last season, that kind of does spark something in your brain, as in like, okay, you know, throw the conventional logic out the door when it comes to fast break offense in the playoffs, because the Lakers just disproved that. So this can be a weapon come playoff time. And Mike, I like that you use the word style, because I do think that that's been the key to the Lakers championship contention for these past 2 years, which has been their ability to kind of shapeshift. I think the best championship teams are shapeshifters, and the Lakers, you know, we saw last year where they would either go big with a JaVale or a Dwight. You could go in the Houston and Miami series, go super small, have Markieff Morris at the 5, and then of course the lineup to end all lineups with the AD at the 5. Now look at this year's Laker team. You have two capable centers that give you something way different. You have Andre Drummond, who is one of the best rebounders of all time, as Pete just outlined, who will give an opponent nightmares on the offensive glass. You have Marc Gasol, who will space the floor for you. Both of them provide what we expect to be above average defense, kind of in different ways. And then you can still go small again if Markieff Morris is your flavor there, or maybe given Kyle Kuzma's ascension on the defensive side, maybe you give that a shake. Pete, I know you don't want to
Trez.
There we
Don't
go.
forget Trez. He's one of the best finishers in the world.
And I also won't forget Anthony Davis, but I'll pass the ball to you now, Pete, if you want to talk to Trez.
No, it's just that, look, we've got a guy for all situations, right? Like Drummond can struggle around the rim sometimes, right? And maybe we're playing some small ball unit in the playoffs, and he's not capitalizing on as many opportunities. We got one of the best finishers in the world. I saw some stat on Spectrum last night where he's averaging like 20 a game on 64% from the field over his last 11. Nobody does that, Joey. You can either score 20 a game or shoot 64%, but very few guys ever do both, not over 11 games, right? So we've got all these wonderful weapons that do different jobs that I'm really excited to see how Vogel deploys those guys and when.
And Pete, that's the beauty of once this gets down to a matchup specific thing. And so let's just throw out, say, the Phoenix Suns, okay, as an example. And we can do this off the top of our heads in 2 seconds because of how many options the Lakers have. So they start DeAndre Ayton. That is likely a good matchup for Drummond. You could also have Gasol. Hold up, just great there. And then Phoenix goes small off the bench with Dario Saric, which is a great matchup for Trez if you want to score a ton at the rim. Now, defensively, you could also have Drummond in that group and stagger some, because Drummond is more than quick enough to stay with Saric and to get out to the 3-point line. And you don't even need the rim protection there as much with that second unit, right? So like, that's just one example, Pete.
And how is Saric going to keep Drummond off of the offensive glass? You got to box him out.
And then, and look, and if things get really tight, okay, fine. We'll put Anthony Davis at the 5, you know, like, so it's
right.
So that's the kind of matchup you think about. Now take Utah, Joey, you like, just feel free, because it's fun, because I just got to do it. So go through the Utah matchups, please, for me.
Yeah, I mean, everything with Utah revolves around Rudy Gobert, right? And I think that Lakers fans writ large will tell you that they love Anthony Davis's matchup against Rudy Gobert. So you start off the top rope there, and you're already looking pretty good. Now, Utah also has Derek Favors, so they can play pretty big, but guess who can also play pretty big? The Los Angeles Lakers. They can play bully balls, as much, if not more, than anybody in the league. I would say maybe Philly is the only one that can kind of go size for size with them. But I think it goes beyond just the center versus center matchup, the power forward versus power forward matchup. It's how much can you combine all 5 guys on the floor and apply their strengths together on a string defensively. You have LeBron James playing Ed Reed type of safety. You have Andre Drummond down low, or Marc Gasol. You have Anthony Davis. You have sizable wings that as we saw in last year's playoffs. You can go Alex Caruso, you can go Kyle Kuzma if you want even more size. The Lakers just have size on top of size is my generic point here.
Yeah.
Where even a team like Utah that revolves around this behemoth and Rudy Gobert, I don't think they can match the Lakers size for size across the board. So and then to Pete's point, sometimes it is a matter of rock beats scissors, scissors beats paper. And so you can try a small ball lineup against Utah. Will it work? Who knows? They're pretty good. There's a reason why they hang their hat on their size. But if you want to try a Trez lineup against them and see how it goes, roll the dice. Maybe it'll work out for you. Maybe it won't. But you can always fall back on having two just ginormous centers in Andre Drummond and Marc Gasol, and not to mention one of the greatest two-way players that we've ever seen here in Los Angeles, in Anthony Davis, unlocked at the center position.
And Pete, all roads to me, and this has been about Drummond, right? But all roads still lead through that LeBron AD combo, because that's what enables all of this other stuff. Because that's the trump card with whatever lineup you want to go to. If you think that you're going to be big, well, LeBron is technically at the 3 then in that sense, and he's too big, he's too strong, he's too smart. So that I just always like to think about in any context of these lineups that we have to remember that LeBron and then AD right behind him, but LeBron is the reason why all this stuff is what it is.
Absolutely. The whole shape shifting that Joey was talking about is possible because of LeBron and AD. Is because they are good to great at nearly every aspect of basketball. So that allows you to get specialists at other positions, guys who that's what's so wonderful about our center rotation is Andre Drummond's one of, if not the best rebounders in the world. Montrezl Harrell's one of the best finishers at the basket in the world. If Anthony Davis is the best small ball 5 in the world, Marc Gasol is one of the best decision-making 7-footers in the world. And so you're able to do that and cover for perhaps some of their weaknesses that make them less of a generalist type of player, and really be able to put those guys in the position to succeed against the right team at the right time, and really let LeBron and AD fill in whatever holes that those guys have, because they're able to do that.
All right, I'm going to kick a final thought over to the pair of you before we get out of here. My final thought is just going to be, we still don't know when LeBron and AD are going to come back. So it's going to be really fun and exciting to see Drummond, however Frank Vogel wants to use him. But I'm still kind of focusing on the big picture and starting to put Drummond in the spots that we think he's going to be in next to LeBron and AD. And I know that's easier said than done, but I'm not going to get too wrapped up and too worried about the role that Drummond is playing these next couple of weeks. I think what they're going to try to do is win the games. Okay. All Frank Vogel's thinking about, how do I beat Milwaukee? How does Andre Drummond, if he plays, fit into that? So that's short term for me is going to just be, hey, figure out whichever ones of these groups win the game. Big picture is getting Drummond in the film room and having him sit next to LeBron and start to talk. Okay. And that's what I want to see. Joey, now what would your final wrap up thought here be?
I think my final thought would be that there are going to be moments where it can look frustrating, especially at the free throw line. I think, Andre, he's improved a lot as a free throw shooter, but that's only because he started, at 0 out of 10, essentially. So now, he's about 60% now, which is fine, but it's still toward the bottom of the NBA. Is that something that people can take advantage of in closing minutes? Well, I don't think you're going to really have to have that discussion, because when it comes to playoff time, you're more likely than not going to be closing with AD at the 5, right? So I think it's all about seeing the forest beyond the trees, because if you I think there are going to be some fans that will focus on the free throws, and that will focus on maybe some shot selection before LeBron and AD come back or something like that. Just these little nuances to his game that maybe stand out as blemishes. But when you look at the opportunity cost, this is a guy that the Lakers got on the buyout market. They got one of the best rebounders, if not the best rebounder in the world, who has all these other different skill sets on top of that. The fast hands on defense, the timing on offense, a lob threat. We just saw Damian Jones go 16 for 17 from the field for these Lakers, and now you're replacing him with Andre Drummond. This is a buyout guy that the Lakers landed out of nowhere. This is a win 100 times out of 100. You do this 100 times out of 100. Andre Drummond is going to be such a key piece to the Lakers now, and they didn't have to give up a Kyle Kuzma or a Montrezl Harrell or anybody else on the roster to get him.
He's 27 years old, Joey. He's not, most of the time when guys get bought out, they're older, they're on their last leg, right? He's 27 years old, was an all-star not that long ago. The one thing that I would impress as a final thought is give him a little bit of time to ramp up. He hasn't played in 6 weeks. The more offensive responsibility that he has, the more likely he'll be to turn the ball over, to have some crazy drive to the rim that doesn't work out and ends up in a wild shot, right? It's what these couple of weeks, knock on wood, without LeBron and AD that we've got remaining will look like, right? And we've seen that in the games without them, is everybody's trying to figure it out because it's such a difference in style of play. And you add on top of that a player who hasn't played in a couple of weeks. You've got a guy who's figuring out the system and all of that. So just have some patience with him. Let him get up to speed. The time to really judge what he will be with us is when our main guys return. But just a remarkable talent, like you said, to get on the buyout market. One of the better buyout market signings really that I can remember.
Great points by both of you. And Pete, I think on that last one too, LeBron, right? Once LeBron comes back, we're going to see something else unlocked in Drummond, just like we've seen basically everybody that's played with this guy. So that's going to do it. He's Joey. I'm Mike. He's Pete. Thanks so much for joining us, guys, on Lakers.com. We'll be sure to come and do this again soon. But for now, we're just going to think about this initial matchup between the Lakers and the Bucks. And this is, of course, hoping Drummond plays. If not, then he'll be on the court soon. Anyway, have a great rest of the day. We appreciate it.